Most guys struggle to quit porn because they aren't building the right habits to replace porn. If you want to learn the simple habit replacement system I've used to help thousands of men quit porn and develop self-mastery, then click the link in the description below and download my free Reboot Regimen guide. Welcome to Universal Man, where we turn your flight into fight so that you can master yourself and conquer your goals. My name is Mark Weppett, and I am here to help you sharpen your masculine edge so that you can cut through the resistance that's holding you back from living on the front lines of life and being a man that you admire. And today we are here with episode 2 of the Sexual Self-Mastery series. And what we're going to be talking about today is why a hard mode reboot is the best reboot. And I think this is an important topic because there's a lot of guys who don't want to do hard mode, okay? And I get it. You know, the name itself sounds intimidating enough. It's like, if you're the guy who likes to play video games on the easy or medium setting, well, you know, I get why hard mode automatically seems like something you might want to shy away from. But ultimately, I think hard mode is actually the easiest mode when you look at the big picture of things. It just requires you to be really honest about what's going on, okay? So before we go any further, I might as well define what the heck a hard mode reboot is, okay? Well, basically, it's just another term for complete abstinence, all right? And if you're trying to quit porn, you know, and you're trying to do a reboot, then you know you got to cut something out. But there's all these different opinions out there about what specifically you should cut out. Should you cut out masturbation? Should you cut out sex? Should you cut out watching porn or just masturbating to it? You know, it's just like there's these different combinations, and you know, for as many different combinations there are proponents for that combination, and I think it can be confusing as to which way you should approach the situation, right? And so here I'm going to be giving you my thought process as to why hard mode is absolutely, hands down, the best approach for at least a temporary period of time for anyone who's serious about kicking porn out of their lives and you know, transforming their sexuality, developing their discipline, and all that kind of stuff. To get to the core of why I think hard mode is the best is because I think it just gives the cleanest reboot and also the most efficient reboot, okay? What you need to do if you want your brain to heal from all this excessive sexual stimulation that you've been giving it is you need to stop giving it that stimulation. Give it some rest so that it can, you know, heal itself. It's kind of common sense, right? If you know, hurt your bicep, well, you shouldn't keep doing bicep curls. You got to let it rest. You got to let it heal, right? And so it's the same deal here. If you're still engaging in some kind of sexual activity, you're still churning on those circuits in your brain, well, you're still pumping energy through those old pathways that we want to fade. Right? We want to fade those old pathways. You might be saying, well, you have to build new pathways. It's like, yeah, but like it doesn't have to happen in that exact same time period. I think that you're very much benefited from taking some time away from sexual stimulation. And ultimately, then you'll be able, when you do go back to it, say you want to have, you know, sex with your partner or whatever, you know, you can do that then from a new place, a new neurological setup. And I think that this is a big deal. And if you can commit to this kind of more hardcore approach, I ultimately think it's going to be faster and more efficient, because what I've seen repeatedly is guys trying to go halfway and do partial measures with this kind of stuff. They don't get the results. They just don't get them. And because of that, they have to keep engaging in this process, this rebooting process, for longer and longer, dealing with more relapses, you know, periods where, all right, well, I didn't masturbate for like 2 months. Well, it's like, were you still watching porn and, you know, whatever? It's like, yeah. Well, I mean, of course the healing is not going to occur. Of course you're not going to get the results you're looking for. You got to cut it all out. And my typical recommendation is for at least 90 days. And then only after that point would, you know, I would recommend, like if you're married or something, go back to start reincorporating sex or something like that. But anyway, to get to the specifics, you know, to get into the nitty-gritty details of why I think this works, let's look at all the pieces. So there's a few different variables, all right? There's porn, there's masturbation, there's sex, and there's orgasm, okay? And so you need to understand why each one of those, understand the role that each one of those plays in your rewiring process, your rebooting process. So let's just start with porn, because that's the most obvious one. You would think, who's challenging that? Yeah, if you're rebooting, you should quit porn. Well, there's a lot of people out there who say, oh, porn's not the problem. The problem is orgasm. You can keep watching porn, you just can't masturbate to it. And, here's the thing, that's not true, all right? Porn is the thing that releases the excessive amounts of dopamine. And I think that it's heightened through masturbation, but the porn itself is very, very high in what it does to your brain in terms of the levels of the dopamine that it releases and the excitement that it causes, okay? And this is an issue. I remember I had a friend in college who, he used to say that, yeah, I like to just watch porn. I don't even need to masturbate to it. I just enjoy watching it. And, frankly, at that point, I could agree with him. Sometimes I didn't even want to do the work to masturbate. I just wanted that super stimulus so I could just zone out. And the problem is that that alone is addictive, all right? And that's not going to be helping you get your brain into a healthier state. That's not going to be helping you resensitize your brain to natural, normal rewards. Instead, it's just going to keep you hooked on this, artificial stimulant drip. And then obviously there's all the other issues where, it's addictive, it can morph your fetishes and your taste. And then obviously there's all the other issues associated with, using porn, it's the act itself is addictive. It can increase, your sexual obsession. It can cause your tastes to morph, and obviously it's a slippery slope. If you're just sitting there watching porn, well, how long are you going to do that before you eventually masturbate to it? All right. So this slippery slope sort of idea is present, I would say, in all of these sort of circumstances. So you gotta ask yourself, does doing this and the fact that it's going to make me want more, is that worth it to me? Is that helping my reboot, or is it hurting it? And in almost all cases, I would say it's pretty much hurting it. So that's no porn. Now let's look at no masturbation. Okay, why should you not masturbate? All right, I believe I have a strong case for quitting masturbation for life. All right, I'm against the practice. I think it's weak and it weakens you. But that's not what I'm going to focus on here, because there's plenty of people out there who's like, oh, masturbation's so healthy, it's so normal, and I don't think that's true. But regardless, let's focus on how it relates to rebooting. Okay, first, we got the slippery slope thing. Okay, but it's, I would say, exacerbated almost over just watching porn and doing nothing else, because masturbation just on its own gets boring real quick, right? You can only do it so many times. And if you're used to using porn as a coping mechanism for dealing with all sorts of stress and emotions and things like that, well, just pure masturbation on its own isn't going to do the trick, all right? And, you got to also think about what you're doing when you are masturbating. Are you just zoning out in a Zen state while you're doing it? Or are you fantasizing? Are you creating porn in your head? Well, if you're creating porn in your head while you're masturbating, are you really doing that much better than going no porn? You're really just kind of doing porn light, okay? And in some ways, you're actually, I believe, strengthening your reflex to fantasize, all right? And this is something that, I think happened with me, was that when I was younger, I didn't have as much access to porn, or I didn't use it as much. And so, I'd rely on fantasy and things like that. But what I believe that does is it trains your brain every time you see a woman to start undressing her and having sex with her in your mind. And eventually those are potentially things that you want to stop doing reflexively and compulsively. And so I think masturbation in some ways trains that. And then, another reason for just, not continuing to masturbation is that anecdotally, I've never met someone who has quit porn but kept masturbating. Or I've never actually heard of that. I'm not saying it hasn't happened, but in all of my experience of working with, hundreds of people at this point, haven't found a guy who's been able to yeah, I just masturbate now, I don't look at porn. They almost always end up resorting to some sort of stimulant. especially if they're hooked on porn to begin with. There are some guys who never were hooked on porn, but they're kind of hooked on masturbation. Well, that's a different sort of scenario. If you're a kind of guy who's been hooked on porn, then, continuing to masturbate is likely going to bring you back to porn. And so another point about no masturbation is that, if you've desensitized your genitals, which is common in the porn recovery community, guys who have done like the death grip, they call it, where you just use a lot of intense pressure and friction to masturbate. Well, if you do that enough, eventually you can desensitize yourself and be unable to enjoy actual sex, because no vagina is going to be able to mimic that level of intensity and pressure or whatever. There's some guys who have, they've masturbated so hard and so intensely that they actually built like a, callus on their ding dong. And so that's a problem, right? That's a problem. And so, obviously you want to stop touching that, stop playing with that bad boy down there so that it can heal. And so this is where people start coming up. I think a lot of people acknowledge these points in the community. And then they put forth this idea of healthy masturbation. And healthy masturbation it's like no fantasy. It's pure sensation with like a light to moderate touch. And what is the point of this? This is my question, is why would you do this? And so one of the things I would say is it's for your prostate. Okay, well, the prostate science is really fairly inconclusive. There are plenty of people who, are celibate and they don't have prostate problems. And there are plenty of people who have a ton of sex and they still have prostate problems. And like the studies are kind of split on whether there's really a strong connection to that or not. So, I think if you're living a relatively healthy life and pursuing the things that you want and, healthy mind, body, spirit, whatever, you don't need to worry about the prostate stuff. And, masturbating is not going to improve your health in that regard. The other thing people say they masturbate for is for the testosterone boost, because after you orgasm, about like 7 or so days after, you get a transient testosterone spike. Transient meaning temporary. And so people feel like, oh, you gotta masturbate to keep your testosterone up. Well, that's not really what happens. And I think there are much better ways to keep your testosterone up, between exercise, food, and then living aggressively, meaning aggressively pursuing your goals, engaging in dominant activity, conquering things. That's what's going to make you feel strong. That's what's going to release your testosterone. Do that combined with a healthy lifestyle. It's going to do way more for you than just, jerking off, which I think is possibly the most beta behavior you can engage in, especially if it's the porn. Seriously, you're going to sit there and watch a dude bang a chick and then like jerk off to that dude banging that chick. I don't know. That seems super beta and super low T to me, but I don't know. I can get into that later. I'm not trying to shame, because I've done it so many times, but as you step away and you start to see things clearly for what they are, it becomes difficult for me to be as diplomatic as I once was about that kind of stuff. And so, the other piece about masturbation, because, I get it, right? Like, this is like something that you've been doing since you were a kid. It's like brushing your teeth. It's just like a part of your life, and it's your comfort thing. It's your adult security blanket, right? That's what it is. It's like whenever you're stressed, sad, lonely, whatever, instead of reaching for, your little teddy bear, your blanket, you reach for your penis and you hug it tight until it makes you feel better, right? And so I get why you don't want to do it. And there's just this feeling like you need it, but you don't. You don't need it. Your orgasm is not a need. It's a want. It's an understandable want, but it's also a want that's been artificially inflated and seriously negatively impacting your life. So you kind of got to get over it. You got to get over it. And I think that it's really going to serve you if you do. And if this is getting you kind of upset thinking about this, well, you're welcome to try continuing to masturbate while quitting porn, but, just get back to me with your results. Let's do that. Let's do it like that. All right, so moving on in our examination of the hard mode reboot. We've looked at no porn, no masturbation, and now let's talk about no orgasm, okay? And the reason I'm looking at this is because some guys think that orgasm's the key. As long as, they just don't orgasm, then they're fine. Like, they can watch all the porn they want, they can masturbate all they want, just as long as they don't cross that line and ejaculate, then they're okay. Some guys will even say that you're allowed to orgasm. You just have to learn how to do an internal orgasm where you don't, a non-ejaculatory orgasm. You got to learn how to bring your orgasm up your spine. And, I was really into it. I looked at all that stuff and was really into it for a while, especially in college. And I don't know, I think it's a lot of BS for the most part. I don't think there's much value in it really at all. And obviously there's going to be a bunch of naysayers out there. Post your piece. I'll read it. But I just don't think it's really going to serve you well regardless, okay? And in some ways, it's actually really going to hurt you. Like if you're doing edging, which is masturbating to porn but not orgasming, what you're actually doing then is you're prolonging that heightened dopamine state. So you end up actually using more dopamine. If you're constantly edging yourself, like not letting yourself orgasm so that you can just keep watching more porn, get more excited and things like that, drawing the whole thing out, multiple tabs, multiple monitors, all that kind of thing. Well, I think you're actually hurting your brain even more. That might be the most damaging form of porn use because you never finish and your brain never comes down. And so I think that's the the high level of overstimulation that you can kind of engage in. So I do not recommend doing it like that. Now, that's not to say like involuntary orgasms are going to kill you. Like if you have a wet dream or whatever, no big deal. No big deal. You just have to understand, like I said, with all these things, we got a slippery slope. So it's like if you orgasm in that way, like through a wet dream, one of the things that tends to happen is this thing called the chaser effect. And that's where your brain, it's got a little taste of something sexual again. And because of that, it wants more. Okay. And so you usually after a wet dream, you just have to be a little careful and a little bit more intentional with your rebooting process. Now, also, I'm not saying that there's nothing to semen retention. I think from what I understand, semen is a fairly costly fluid for your body to produce. Like it's actually pretty taxing. It takes a lot of food, a lot of energy to produce semen. And if you're not, squirting it out of yourself all the time, there may very well be some significant health and mental benefits to it. I know that I've definitely seen them myself, but beyond that, I think that more than anything, just orgasm in general, when you treat it as something like a toy, you just treat it as an itch to scratch, then it's not going to serve you well because it's something far more, I think, serious than that and requires more discipline and understanding and purpose around it if you really want to have your best relationship with it. At least that's my take. So now we're going to look at the big one, okay? No sex, all right? I mean, I know there's a lot of guys out there who think, what, no sex? Surely it's ideal to trade porn for sex, right? Wouldn't it be better for me to get a prostitute instead of just masturbate all the time? No, I mean, that's actually a conversation that happens pretty frequently on the porn recovery forums. It's like, maybe I should just get a prostitute. Well, so here's the thing, like, I'm going to take the risk of making a moral argument here, okay? So I think that if you are a heavy porn user, when you have sex with someone, you're essentially just masturbating with their body, meaning that you're not really connecting with that person. You're just focusing on enhancing your pleasure and getting your nut. And I think that that's not healthy. And so whether you're with a prostitute or your wife, if you're a porn addict, you're not really connecting with that person because you just haven't trained yourself to be. You're just too much like focused on trying to get that pleasure to the point where that other person simply becomes a tool, a means to an end. And I don't know how you feel about that, but I think that's a crappy thing. So I don't think it's right to bring someone into that sort of what I would call dysfunction, okay? But beyond this kind of moral component, we got to think about the reboot. Well, a lot of guys tend to pornify sex while they're, not recovered from, the porn addiction. And what I mean by this is that, they try to engage in fetish-based behavior that just makes them want the porn more, or they try to they have to maintain certain angles so it seems like they're watching porn while having sex, and that makes them can make them want more porn, and basically just doing all kinds of weird. Maybe even they need to actually think about porn. They're actually thinking about porn while they're having sex. And if you're doing that, I mean, you pretty much are masturbating with that other person's body. And I don't think any of these things are going to help you in your reboot. And so it's porn addiction is a bad enough thing to deal with solo, but to bring someone else into that problem on such an intimate level, I just don't think is healthy. Now, What about the rewiring? Aren't you supposed to rewire yourself back to real sex? I would say yes, you are, but maybe not all at once. I think you need to have this temporary period of abstinence so that you can then reconnect far more authentically. And after you let those porn pathways recede a little bit, well, from there, I think then that you can focus on building new pathways that focus on more genuine forms of intimacy. And so, if you're married, doesn't mean you can't look at your wife or touch her or whatever during this period. Just stick to cuddling, stick to holding hands, try to reconnect with them emotionally, psychologically, and that sort of thing. Start building intimacy from the foundation up in the way that it's traditionally always been built, non-sexually first and then the sex introduced. So, well, I guess in some cases that wasn't always it. Sometimes you just meet your wife on your wedding day and you'd have sex. So, I don't know. In modern times, that's what we've seemed to identify as the best approach, is to take some time, get to know the person, build that sort of intimacy, then put the sex on it. And that's essentially what I'm recommending to you. Just kind of go back to basics with them. Build it back up, and then after you get some time on your belt, clean so that you can heal your brain, then you can reintroduce the intimacy. Okay, if you're watching the video version of this right now, then you've noticed that the environment and the setup has sort of changed a little bit. Basically what has happened is that as I was editing this talk, I realized that I left out probably the most crucial point of this argument, okay, as to why you should do a hard mode reboot. And the core point is that hard mode forces you to learn how to live without sexual stimulation. Okay. And I think that is huge because, most guys, as soon as they start masturbating, they've never stopped. They've never taken a prolonged period without it. And so they build this idea, they build this, thought in their head that they need sexual stimulation consistently in order to survive. And you hear this kind of argument all the time from guys. It's like, she's not meeting my needs, or I need to get my needs met. Oh, my needs. Oh, my needs. It's just it's not a need. It's really not a need, but you think it is. You think it is because you've always had it. And so when you take it away, you experience withdrawal symptoms and you think you're dying, okay? Here's a funny story that kind of drives this point home, all right? Back when I was a teenager, I think I was a sophomore, all right? And it was Lent, and I'm Catholic, and I was going to give up porn and masturbation for Lent. And I think I ended up going about a month and a week or something. And I was getting so frustrated and so pent up and so, I felt like I was going to explode, okay? And so I was like, this sucks. If God didn't want us to masturbate all the time, then he wouldn't have made it so painful. And I remember I jerked off and I felt amazing. And I just started cracking up because I'm like, all right, clearly church teachings on sexuality are BS because this feels so good and so right. And I think this is an experience that a lot of guys have, at least on some level. They have this experience of maybe spending time away from it and then coming back to sex, sexual stimulation, masturbation, porn, whatever, and they feel so good. And it creates this perception that, yeah, I really do need it. But in almost every circumstance, you're already addicted to begin with, and you just kind of entered into the peak sort of withdrawal period. Okay. If I had extended that period of abstinence, maybe a couple months longer, then I would have realized, holy crap, my body has adapted. All right. And I think that this is really crucial, especially for anyone who wants to get married someday. It's there are always going to be seasons in your life where you can't get the kind of sex that you want. Okay. For, maybe health reasons, maybe emotional reasons on your part, on their part, your partner's part, for any number of reasons, you may not be able to get the kind of sex that you want. And if you don't know how to operate and even thrive in that sort of scenario, well, then that will always serve as a justification for falling back into porn use. Okay. And so at some point, you need to learn and experience that living without sex won't kill you. It was eye-opening for me because I actually thought I might die. But you won't. In fact, you'll actually just get stronger, in some cases a lot happier, and be able to focus on other things. And, it's really not so horrible once you get through that tough point. And so hard mode forces you to confront that and, in a way that no other kind of reboot really does. So I wanted to make sure I put that point in this video because I really think it is absolutely crucial. And so, if you really want to reach your peak of sexual health, then do the hard mode reboot, learn that you can live without it, because it's only once you can learn to live without sex that you can then engage with it, choose to enter into a sexual relationship on your terms, okay? Because until that point, until you learn that you're okay without it, then you are a slave to it. You are a victim to it. And I'm very much against victimhood here in this, in Universal Man. I want people to be taking ownership of themselves, of their lives, of their sexual energy. And I think that, hard mode's the way to do it. Okay, so that's my little update. Back to the other video. So there we go. That's what I've got for you. No porn, no sex, no orgasm, no masturbation, and that's hard mode. And I sincerely believe that this is your best chance if you really want to get the best reboot possible. So, if you don't want to do it, that's fine. That's fine. You can try your approach, whatever way that you decide to do it, and just see how it works. If you get success in that way and you get what you want, well, then I'm really happy for you and I will fully support you. But I'm just talking in general for anyone else who is a little confused, give this a shot. It is harder up front, but it's ultimately easier over the long run. And that's really one of the big lessons you have to learn in the process of quitting porn, is that you can't just grasp at immediate gratification. You can't just take the easy way, because that's what porn is. Porn is the easy way. It's the way to instant pleasure. But sometimes the best route is to take the hard route. And sometimes the hard route is very hard, but it's the best route. And so aim for the best, not for the easiest. But anyway, that's what I've got for you guys. Hopefully you found this episode useful. And until next time, stay sharp. Hey, if you found this episode useful and you want to hear more, make sure you like, subscribe, and if you're tuning in on YouTube, make sure you hit that bell button to turn on notifications. But if you really like this content and you would like to join the tribe of Universal Men, then you need to head on over to the Universal Man Patreon page by clicking the link in the description. We call ourselves the Vanguard because we are committed to living on the front lines of life. By joining, you'll gain access to exclusive content, weekly accountability, community chat rooms, and live calls. Also, by joining the Vanguard, you become a part of my inner circle. Therefore, you get my prioritized attention. Most importantly, though, you'll be joining a crew of like-minded guys that can help support and inspire you on your journey of masculine self-mastery. So click the link below and sign up today.